Thank you for joining me for Music in My Life. Today's guest is going to be Peter Manners-Smith. Peter Manners-Smith works in the property business, but he has a passion for music, and he wouldn't be doing anything else. Regardless of what he's doing in his life, music has to be a part of it. So, stick around and wait for his story. Well, I'm here with Peter Manners-Smith. What a polite name. That's so cheesy. Ken, stay in your lane. Music is what you do. But Peter, thank you so much for joining.
Pleasure. Nice to see you.
Great. So, Peter, you are a keyboard player, a pianist. You play a bit of bass as well, is that correct?
Tiny bit, yeah.
Okay. Drums?
Yep.
Tiny bit. Okay. And you sing a bit?
You wouldn't want to hear it.
And you arrange music.
Yeah.
But you also have a passion for music. I mean, because you're not actually a musician. Well, you are a musician because everybody who does music is a musician. But you don't do music full time as a career. So what do you do as a career?
I work for the Prudential, which is a large insurance group in the City of London. That's my day job. I work as in real estate fund management. So yeah, very different from the music industry. But it's important for me that whatever career I pursue, I'm able to carve out sufficient time to commit to my passion, which is music.
So do you see any similarities between the two? Between what you actually do musically and what you do at work? Do you find that there are sort of disciplines which transfer from one?
Oh, definitely. The more music that you do, the more you realise that simply pressing notes on a keyboard, for example, isn't necessarily enough to let you to do what you would perhaps like to do. So there's actually, for example, organisational ability, which you pick up in a career at work, which you need to apply directly to event management, for example, for music, or indeed running groups of musicians. So things like management skills come into that as well, communication skills, absolutely vital in, say, for example, a group musical setting. To be able to music direct something, you need to have very transferable skills, which can easily have come from the business world.
Great. How's your mathematics?
It's all right.
It
has to be for my job.
It's got to be for your job.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting because they say that good musicians make good mathematicians. Have you heard that one before?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why do you think that is?
I think certainly when you look at the structure of music, you've got to be, for example, the circle of fifths, very mathematic in its essence.
For those who don't know what we're talking about when we say the circle of fifths, because you might say, well, 5 does have a circle. But the circle of fifth is it's a chord progression. Let me do it in the song. And that's what a circle of fifths is, just for the viewer's point of view. You can try it on the piano, just start on a note and just go down 5 and down 5 and down 5 and down 5 and down 5. You'll get the bass line for many, many songs that you actually like to listen to. And you can impress your mates next time and say, oh, I know what that is. That's a circle of fifths. Okay, so great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a 2-5-1 chord progression, for example, probably the most prominent sound, if you like, in Western music.
So
again,
2-5-1 sounds like this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an inherent mathematical base to a lot of this, and that's before you even start looking at, for example, written music, where an acknowledgement of subdivisions of the bar, for example, which is quite mathematical in itself, is very important for that. As a drummer, there's a lot of understanding that you need of subdivisions to be able to do that. So if you were to replace certain things with triplets that might otherwise have been standard crotchets, for example, there's an understanding of maths that goes in there as well. So I would say I don't think maths when I play music, but if I sit back and look at maths and music,
Sure.
there's certainly some similarities.
Wow, okay, well we just had a maths and music lesson all in one. Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, da ba ba da ba. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, why not? Why not? Three of those.
Yeah, okay.
Let's see what happens. Okay. All right.
What were some of your poignant musical memories? Was there a lot of music at home at the time? Did you have family members who were musical, etc., etc.? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I guess my earliest musical memories, probably in my subconscious, are of Handel's Water Music, which my mum used to play me to get me to sleep.
Wow.
When I was
Really?
a baby. Yeah. So somewhere deep down inside, that I'm sure that's all ingrained in there. But my house was a very musical house. The only person who didn't actively play an instrument was my mother, but actually I think she's inherently a very musical person.
Right.
All the rest of us were pianists. The piano seat was never cold. In our house, you'd have to fight for your place on it, sort of thing.
So did you at any time have this sort of desire to become a musician full time, or were you told you will get a proper job in the city where they pay money, lots of it, and bonuses?
Yeah. I have to admit, when I was at the age when you'd have to think about becoming a professional musician, music was a really inherent part of my life. But if I looked around me, it's possible that there were other people out there who were, spectacular, and I was okay. And if I'd have developed, a university 3 or 4 years practicing 5 hours a day, sure, I think there's a possibility I could have pursued a career in music. But I think one of my impressions of a career in music is that not only do you need brilliance, but you also need a tiny bit of good fortune as well. And perhaps a job which regularly put bread and water on the table, sort of thing, for a family might have been a more stable option for me. But I have to say, I would never take a job now that didn't allow me to keep playing music. Right. So it's very much a case of you know, I'll do music, but I can do it in my spare time. So I can, with my band that I play in a small jazz band, we can take the gigs that we want to take,
right.
Rather than having to take the next gig, because that's what puts food on the table for my family.
Right.
So there's a certain freedom,
yes.
if you like, in that I can simply pursue the things I really want to do rather than absolutely having to do it. So
right.
there's some positives and negatives to not having pursued it full time.
Okay, good. And what other musical influences and styles around? You mentioned Handel's Water Music, which was played at Infinitum in home.
Yeah.
What was it, anything other than that? Because obviously Handel's Water Music is very sort of safe. Once, you know, it's a classical piece of music and it's innocent. But was there anything that you were kind of listening to behind the scenes? Because I know in my days, or when we were listening to like reggae music, it wasn't really the done thing in the house, you know, because I grew up in a very strict but loving, very, very loving Christian home. And parents from the Caribbean, and reggae music was associated with, you know, the ghettos and Rastafarianism and et cetera, et cetera. So we had to listen almost, you know, underground in secret. So, you know, so we're grateful for the headphones that we were able to, you know, listen to the music. It's a wonderful piece of Beethoven, that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was fairly blessed. I didn't necessarily. My parents didn't make me feel as if I had to listen behind closed doors to other styles of music. I think there's a sense in which they'd have been much more concerned if I was listening to music with lyrics which were in some way destructive, or I also grew up in a Christian home, so perhaps if they were very sort of anti-God or in some other way destructive for a child to be listening to, I'm sure they'd have said something. Which is interesting because one of my loves is jazz.
Yes.
That, for a lot of rather traditional Christian homes, is a style of music which, again, could be associated with, you know, perhaps some behaviours which you wouldn't normally find within the Christian community. But I think that's quite a historic view now.
Right.
If we sort of go back maybe 50 years, I think there's a lot more validity to those sort of claims. Whereas these days, if you walk into Ronnie Scott's jazz club in London, which is probably one of the most famous in the world, you can't even smoke in there, for example.
Right, sure, okay.
So they're much more civilized places than, if you like, than they used to be.
Great,
But so
okay. Well,
jazz
look,
was
we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but we're just going to hear a song now, so.
People get ready, there's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear those diesels humming. Don't need no tickets, you just thank the Lord. People get ready, there's a train to Jordan, picking up passengers from coast to coast. Faith is a key, open up the doors and board them. There's room and hope for those who loved the most. There ain't no room for the hopeless sinner who has hurt all mankind just to save his own. Pity all those whose chances grow thinner. There ain't no hiding place against the kingdom's throne. So people get ready, there's a train a-coming. Don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesels humming. Don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. You just thank the Lord. You just thank the Lord.
So we were talking a little bit about your band. So tell me about the band. What's the makeup?
So there's 5 of us. I'm the piano player. We've also got a bass player, a drummer, a guitarist, and a singer.
And it's interesting because, from my understanding, everybody comes from different countries.
Yeah, that's right. I'm actually the only Brit in the band. So we've got myself, our drummer is Dutch, our bass player's from Serbia, our singer's from Estonia, and we've got an Icelandic guitarist. So it's quite diverse.
What are some of the joys you get out of being part of an ensemble?
Oh yeah, it's a completely different feeling from playing by yourself. So if you to compare it to sitting down, for example, and playing the piano by yourself, it's a very different way of thinking about using your instrument for starters. So here I'm, if you like, 1/5 of the musical pie, and there are other people contributing to that. That means sometimes I need to play less than I would do if I was playing by myself. So for example, I wouldn't play the bass line because I have a bass player to do that. I don't need to drive the rhythm so much because I've got a drummer to do that. Sometimes I don't even need to stick to the chords so much because I've got a guitarist to do that. I certainly don't need to play the tune because I've got a singer to do that. It makes you really think about where your musical place is, and that's a new and exciting challenge versus playing by yourself. I think also you really bounce off each other in terms of musical ideas. And I think jazz is a great medium for that. So, for example, if you're soloing, and say I was a drummer, and I heard somebody doing a particular rhythmic motif in their solo, I would very much try to emphasize that with them. It's very much an interactive experience playing in the jazz band. So yeah, bouncing off each other can sometimes lead to new and creative things that you'd never have come up with by yourself.
Brilliant. And because even just, what we call jazz scatting, which is sort of making vocal noises, can be quite fun to do where the instrument plays. And I've seen this done so many times where... Yeah, and you need to listen and respond to really what's going on.
Absolutely.
It's part of it, and I think that's just unifying, bringing you all together. Different languages, different instruments, different modes of expression, but all coming together.
Absolutely.
As one.
And we're all good friends, so that interaction becomes all the easier, I think.
Right, and there's also something also interesting about that as well, because you shared with me earlier that the band all come from one denomination, which is the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, which is traditionally quite conservative and quite sort of frown on jazz. But I've got friends who are not musicians, but they listen to music, to jazz music, and we put all these labels on music. We call it jazz, and we call it blues, and we call it... But, they hear it as music, and they said it's quite a spiritual feeling for them. It connected them to the divine. So, what's your take on that? Do you sort of feel guilty? Because your drummer's a pastor.
You're right, he is.
So,
it's not your typical church band, that's for sure. Believe it or not, we've even played jazz in churches.
Right.
And I think, for me, musical style and appropriateness when it comes to spirituality are mostly separated, in my opinion. I think there's a great deal to which the music is able to stir people's emotions, and I think we've got to we've got to be careful with that. It's dynamite, if you like, that we have in our hands to use. But beyond that, it's a bit like what I said with my parents being much more concerned about the words that I'd be listening to music in a similar way, providing that the music that's being played, for example, in a church, is supporting the function, which might be congregational singing. If it's doing that appropriately and it's not upsetting or offending people, then I think that's absolutely appropriate.
Great. So you do a lot of, obviously, work as normal bands would do, playing at functions, but you also dedicate time to charity.
Yeah, we do. So we've played at numerous charity concerts. If you like, various members of the band have gone and done other charitable events. So, for example, in a church near Bracknell, which I belong to, we put on a large charity concert every year with 150 or so performers.
Wow.
We
so 150 performers. What the?
That's right. So there's
all performing
choirs
at the same time.
Usually not. I think the maximum we've had about 100 at the same time. So
Right.
in terms of orchestras, choirs, etc., all being together.
Nice.
And a couple of us regularly go and play for a charity concert in Norway, supporting a charity called ADRA, the Adventist Development and Relief Agency. So it's very much, from my perspective, a talent that I've been blessed with, and I'm very happy to give that back in terms of trying to do things which are worthwhile.
Okay, because many people would see sort of music, they listen to music, and they see music and singing as being the career, and very often they're looking at the television where they're seeing stars in limos and on a big stage, and enjoying the rest of life and earning lots of money and then spending it all and declaring themselves bankrupt. And then coming to see people like you, the wealth managers, to say, okay, we're going to put our lives back together again. But of course, you're doing sort of charity work and you're enjoying what you're doing. So it's obviously a passion that you have inside of you which drives you to do that.
Absolutely. One of the ways which I have been paid to do music in the past is to play piano in hotels, restaurants, etc. Sort of background music. And quite honestly, I found the concept of being paid to sit down and play the piano for 3 hours almost laughable, because I would happily do that for free. I find that extremely fun. So it's not certainly for me. Playing music is not necessarily connected with remuneration. At all, although it's nice if it can be.
It's nice if it can be, but it's most, traveling around the world, you see that music, there's some cultures where music, there's no word which exists for music as a self-contained activity. So the concept of actually music as performance, just doesn't exist. Music is a communal activity. Absolutely. And it's so natural and it's part of everyday life. And you don't do it for reward. For the reward is actually the music itself brings that reward. Yeah. So, what about the future for Peter Manners-Smith?
Well, that's a fairly good question. I can never see a point where music's not a big part of my life. I'm currently building a house. I'm building a studio into the basement.
Oh, wow.
So that's a pretty permanent commitment, certainly, to that going forwards. But no, for me, it's very much a part of who I am.
Well, you're a family man. Yes. Your kids old
That's
enough
right.
to,
I've got a wife and 2 children. My oldest daughter is 2. So
she's shown any musical science yet?
Yeah, she's got a lot of rhythm, and she remembers songs very quickly, which for me, as somebody who plays primarily by ear rather than from music, that's an encouraging sign for me to see that in my children.
Well, that's an important point actually, because you talk about playing by ear, and many some look down on people who play by ear because they are, the high art. You must learn how to read music, and if you don't read music, you will never get. But that's not exactly true, is it? You've got methods like the Suzuki method in Japan, where you learn by ear. You learn the music first, then you see the notes later, which is how we learn how to talk and read.
Yeah.
We talk first, and then we learn the symbols that represent what we're actually saying. So, do you find yourself paralyzed by?
I think there are very few situations that I find myself in where I think, goodness me, it would be really useful to be able to sight read perfectly right now. But the vast majority of times that I find myself playing music, the contribution that my ear or musical memory or whatever you want to call it makes to that is far stronger. And things like, for example, arranging music have an absolute requirement for you to be able to use your musical ear and then notate afterwards in retrospect.
Okay. Great. It's been really interesting speaking to you about
And you.
music and maths and property. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today. And hey, come and see us again.
Will do. Take care.
Thank you.
Well, I had a great time with my guest today, Peter Mannes-Smith. Somebody once said that if you haven't danced at least once, then your day has been wasted. Well, my day certainly hasn't been wasted because I've played and I've danced at this piano. So I've been fulfilled. So go and find that piece of music, or find that musical instrument which has been hiding in your closet for years, and discover the musical passion within. Once you've done that, make a date to join me again for Music in My Life. I'm off to listen to some music.